time. So we'll give people until about 11:20 Central Time. I have a lot of Zoom meetings, and usually we give people a few minutes. One particular meeting within my community, and I live in a residential community, happens over Zoom because we still are under masking regulations because of COVID within our community. So if we're in common areas and we all have to be masked, so we've just kind of resorted, even though we're in the same building, we've resorted to having meetings online. But one person is especially insistent on a committee that I serve on that we start absolutely on time. So if you get there a minute late, the agenda's already set and and people are discussing things.
Hey, Jim, will you be able to help us scribe? Jim or Josh?
I'm on my phone right now, so I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to take notes.
It will be for later on, like maybe 20 minutes from now.
Yeah, I won't be at my laptop. Josh, are you able?
Yes, I should be able to do that.
So in order to do that, just go into the creating mode on the show, on the Google show. And as we go through the questions that start like, midway down or a third of the way down the presentation, just each question, if you could just help us record answers on the questions as we go through. Chris just gave you the link to that.
Solo un anuncio rapidito que vamos a estar empezando en unos 5 minutos para creo que 1 minuto. Para los que están uniendo hasta ahorita, vamos a hacer un anuncio sobre interpretación pronto. Just letting folks know that we'll be starting soon and we'll be making an interpreting announcement soon.
Okay, it's 11:20, so let's just get started here. I am Steve Ediger from Chi Commons Co-op in Chicago. I am joined by Chris Preciado. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Could we do the introductions after the interpreting starts? Sorry.
Oh, okay. Let's do that.
So we don't have, because I'll have to remember everything you say.
Oh, okay.
Disculpa la interrupción, solo quería pedir el permiso de hacer las introducciones después de la interpretación. So, hi everyone, my name is Emily and my co-interpreter today is Alfonso. We're working with the Interpreters Cooperative of Wisconsin, and we'll be providing simultaneous interpreting in English and Spanish for the meeting today. So just, hola a todos, soy Emily y mi cointérprete hoy es Alfonso. Estamos trabajando con la cooperativa de intérpretes de Wisconsin y este evento va a estar presentado en inglés y español. Si usted no entiende el inglés, por favor seleccione el canal para el español y si está usando una computadora simplemente haga clic en el botón que dice interpretación o si está conectado por la aplicación en Zoom, en su teléfono, hace clic en los 3 puntitos y siga las indicaciones en la pantalla. Desafortunadamente, la interpretación no funciona en los aparatos Chromebook o Linux. Today's event will be in both English and Spanish. We might have some participation in Spanish. So if you don't understand Spanish, please select your channel for English. We'll be opening the channels in just a minute, so you'll see them appear on your screen. If you're using a computer, you'll just click on interpretation. Or if you're connected by the Zoom application on your phone, you'll click on the 3 dots, and then you'll find interpretation in the drop-down list and follow the instructions on the screen. Just select English if you'd like to hear in English. And unfortunately, interpreting is not available. The feature is not available on Chromebooks or Linux devices. Por favor, silencie su micrófono cuando no esté hablando. Y también pedimos a todos los presentadores que hablen despacio, especialmente si están leyendo. Después, y esto es importante para que podamos escuchar y decir todo lo que dicen a través de la interpretación. So just a couple of reminders, please mute your mic when you're not speaking. And we ask all presenters to speak slowly, which is hard for folks to remember, especially if you're reading off a presentation, people tend to speed up. So that's just really important. So we make sure to catch all of the important messages that you're sharing today, and it can all be interpreted. And I think that's all, just a quick note. So we'll start the channels now, and let us know in the chat if you're having any trouble joining your channel. Es todo. Vamos a empezar ahora con los canales de idioma, y si tienen cualquier problema en escoger su lenguaje, por favor, déjenos saber en el chat. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Are the channels live yet? I don't see it on my screen.
Not yet. Looks like Rec will have to start then.
Did that work?
Yep.
It's almost, but I'm not assigned as an interpreter yet. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Alfonso is. That's perfect. Just add one more. That my device that says interpreter. This one.
So do I select one too, or as an interpreter? Do I select the Spanish or not? As the interpreter, do I have to select that as well?
Be sure to select none after selecting the language that you want.
Yeah, you select listen to main floor and speak into Spanish.
Okay.
They've changed the interface pretty recently.
Okay. Does everyone have interpretation that they need? Emily, do you have what you need? No?
No, it just switched off.
What?
It just switched off.
Oh. Well, how did I do that?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Not sure.
Sorry. So once again, I'm not an interpreter. I could walk you through the steps, so it sounds like the interface may have changed. But so when you click on interpreting, set up interpretation, there should be a screen that pops up with a little plus symbol. So you add interpreter and just type in interpreter, and my name should pop up.
Did that work?
No, I'm still just seeing it as a participant, not as an
Okay. I'm
interpreter.
gonna try ending interpretation again and restarting it.
Sorry, everyone.
Not to worry. We have time for this session.
That worked? Okay, great. I don't know why I
All
needed
right.
to like stop and restart again, but it did.
So reminder to those of you who are English, they're speaking English, you can select English in the English channel. So if somebody has questions in the Spanish channel, then we can all hear them. Hello, I am Steve. I'm going to share my screen for a moment here. All right, can you all see that Co-op Connection Network?
I can see it.
All right, thank you. Just move things around here because I have multiple monitors and it appeared a little differently than I expected it to. Hi, I am Steve Ediger and I am joined by my co-host Chris. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Christopher Preciado of Co-ops Not Cages in Chicago, Illinois.
And I am from Shy Commons in Chicago, Illinois. So Chris is going to kick us off with our presentation, and just let me know when you want slides changed, Chris.
All right, yeah, and I'm gonna, let's see, sorry, I'm gonna edit the access to the presentation so Josh can go ahead and help us out. Yeah, so before I dive into this, I just wanted to give a quick summary of today's presentation. For the first 20 to 25 minutes, I'm gonna share with you what Co-op Connection Network is about. Then there will be an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. And then I'm gonna hand over the mic to Steve Ediger, who's gonna steward an interactive activity with all of us in reflection of today's presentation. So we can move on to the slide that is the story of our birth.
Oops.
Yeah, excuse my awkward language. I am not used to talking slow. Yeah, the story of our birth. The idea of the Co-op Connection Network came from last year's regional rendezvous. The first virtual meeting that we had was on July 21st of last year. And we've had about one meeting every month since then. We've been meeting through Zoom, although we would like to shift to something that's more cooperative. Initially, this effort was called peer-to-peer co-op liaisons, but recently we changed the name to Co-op Connection Network. The reason why we changed the name is we felt that peer-to-peer could be a little bit confusing in light of what we wanted to capture as a result of this network. And just a heads up, we have been meeting on second Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Central. So if you're interested in getting involved, mark your calendars. And we'll talk a little bit more later about getting involved. I'm going to review some of the early work we've done. One of the first things that we did was just to try to get us all on the same page. We needed to bring together 2 email chains that emerged after the rendezvous in which people were interested in talking about this. And so we combined those together. We also took quite a bit of time to find out when was the best time and frequency to meet. And we settled on once per month. We also spent quite a few discussions grounding us on the general idea of the initiative. For example, I didn't even know it was going to be a means for peer support. When I saw P2P, I thought it was something more technical. And during this time, when we first started getting together, we shared resources, and we did some collective research on the idea. We did try to jump in right away in developing some of the materials that would be useful for creating this network. And that helped us to envision what gaps we needed to fill. And something that we started doing right away that we've been doing today, that we're continuing today, is exploring the worker cooperative ecosystem to ensure that we're not doing something that someone else is doing or that another group of people are doing. And up to now, our consensus is that we are doing something unique and something that is needed. All right, next slide. Contours of the network. Two of our achievements has been to narrow down what we want to do and how we do it. This is manifest through our mission statement and our statement of what we do. Our mission statement is to foster stronger peer-to-peer, direct mutual aid networks between worker cooperatives and worker owners. Our statement of what we do is our work includes developing and maintaining direct relationships with worker cooperatives across the USA and beyond. To accomplish this, one project we have is maintaining interactive maps and lists of worker owner points of contacts and spaces that other worker owners can easily access. There are a few links on this slide that reflect some of the nuts and bolts of what Co-op Connection Network is up to. One is the map of participating cooperatives. It's on the top of this slide. And this map is what we intend to share to the public. We will populate it with data from worker cooperatives who wish to participate in this network for peer support. Steve, would you actually like to explain the put yourselves on the map link?
Yeah, we were really fortunate that Esther West, who is a board member at U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, very interested in supporting worker co-ops. And she does some mapping with Google. And so she developed a form. If you click on put yourself on the map, you can add your co-op to your worker co-op to the map. If you look at the map now, you'll see there's only a couple of entries on it, at least the last time I looked. So we're really anxious and interested in having people put themselves on the map. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you. The shared Google Drive is where we are doing our best to store all the documents that we are using for this effort. And my understanding is that this is public, that we would like for other worker cooperators to be able to access this information. And part of that is to help get others involved in what we're up to. The last link is a sign-up form. This is for anybody who would like to join us in lifting up this work. Yeah, so we can move on to the next slide. Our decision-making process up until now has been through consensus. The pattern of our decision-making is so far has been unanimous consent. We have taken quite a long while to build consent over many things, and we've never had to resort to majority votes. And we've never experienced lift any blocks. And since sometimes there are people who cannot partake in the meeting, our pattern has also been to take about at least 1 month for something to pass. Because if we come to agreement on something in a meeting, we usually bounce that agreement through our email chain to see if anybody would like to make any changes or block. And because of that process, it usually takes about a month for something to pass. And it's been a very smooth process so far. All right.
Oops.
There is some good work we have to consolidate still. So I'll briefly review some of the tasks and discussions that are in process. One is we haven't finished our discussion about the geographic scope of this co-op connection network. We have some ideas, and I think part of what has slowed us down up until now is that we have seen that it seems that there are similar things emerging, and so we want to mediate our boundaries to have the best impact for the ecosystem. We have some logos that are still in development. There are plenty of values and aspirations that have been brought up along the way that we haven't had a chance to completely dive into. And so they're part of our parking lot. And I'm looking forward to circling back to dig into these different ideas that have been put forward, especially those that I have forgotten. And a final very serious thing is the specifics of how and where we are going to share the information that is given to us by worker cooperators. It's a very, the information that we're probably going to be soliciting will be pretty sensitive. And so we want to make sure that we are being as diligent as we can to protect people's data and not overwhelm them with the kind of connectivity that we are trying to facilitate. All right, so I'm landing the plane for my part of today's presentation. We are cordially inviting fellow worker cooperators to help us nurture the seeds that we've planted of a peer-to-peer network for worker cooperatives by helping us to hold down this effort. There are definitely some benefits to helping us lift up this work. Some that we've seen so far are, one, I think it's pretty fun talking to other worker cooperators. Steve and Josh, Jim, Esther, very fun people. In the process of planning, it is a very educational experience. And you know, it's exciting to hear what's going on in other parts of the ecosystem. And in the process, we have already seen peer support. One of the challenges that we're facing is that we don't have enough people to lift up this work. There's definitely a lot of people who want to help, but you know how it is. A lot of us are doing too much, and we can't spread ourselves too thin because that diminishes the quality of other work that we're doing. So we definitely need the help of others who are not spread too thin to help us lift up this work. So there is this sign up form in the presentation
Oops. Sorry.
if you would like to get involved. Right now, our schedule is to meet on second Wednesdays of the month at 7 p.m. Central Time. But we can change that to, we can try to change that to accommodate to the availability of other people who are interested in joining us. And the sign up form does include a question to help us figure out how we might be able to do that by you telling us what your availability is to participate in a 1 hour meeting once per month. And that's about it. The next part of the presentation is taking over, is soliciting any clarifying questions. And after we answer any clarifying questions, I'm going to let Steve take over.
I don't hear any clarifying questions. Remember that you probably have your mic muted. So if you're asking questions, unmute your mic.
Hi, I have a clarifying question. My name is Abby. I'm curious what kind of peer support you're most interested in creating space for with the peer network. If there's like a particular kind of support that's most interesting to you, or if this is kind of a broad space for that. And I'm curious, like along those lines, what kind of support or networking among different worker cooperatives feels missing right now within the ecosystem?
Hey, Jim, would you be interested in answering this question? I know you're not presenting, but I think you might have some good answers.
Sure. I'll do my best. I had a little trouble hearing you, Abby, the latter part, but let me know if I failed to answer your question. And I'll try to keep this short. But there are many possibilities, and there's a long history of peer-to-peer support between worker co-ops, as I understand it, and that I started encountering when I was in my first worker co-op like 23 years ago, before the Federation existed. And so, and I think maybe the best answer to your question is to look at that history. A lot of it just has to do with people who want to start worker cooperatives, finding a worker cooperative that they walk into or that they contact somehow and saying, how did you do this? And can you help coach us in doing this, right? And so there's basic scoping a startup question, but also just for a couple of examples, the more mature worker co-ops often, it's common for a worker co-op to start up with a core group of founders and to operate for 2 to 4 years with that core group of founders. And only then do they start taking on new people, for example. And onboarding new workers after you've established this very tight-knit founder culture can be very difficult, for example. And that's, again, not unlike some aspects of startup, that the cultural dynamic, the culture of a workplace democracy is part of what it's a big part of what makes it so powerful, of course, but it's also part of what makes it challenging to integrate new people. So there have been strong peer-to-peer efforts in the past and ongoing now today, but things like, MadWork and other regional peer networks around the country. And so these are the kinds of questions they've tackled. So there's a broad need, really, for ongoing peer-to-peer support. There's a lot more support out there from professional developers and the US Federation than there used to be. And so, but we think that, you know, a lot of the goal of what we're doing here is we're trying to build capacity within worker co-ops. We're trying to build co-op development capacity within worker co-ops and within the brains of worker owners to build greater resilience and greater solidarity between those worker co-ops. And so the answer to your question, I'm afraid, is very broad. All kinds of help is what we seek. Our specific goal here is to create a liaison network, if you know what I mean, where there are points of contact within each existing worker co-op, people who have volunteered to sort of be the point of connection for their co-op so that we can start identifying these needs more effectively within the co-op network and establish simple communication with each other. And from there, having established this liaison network, I'm probably talking too fast for the interpreters, but by then having established a network of people in worker co-ops talking to each other, we will be able to get a better grasp of what we can call, you know, strengths and gaps. What strengths do we have in our community of worker co-ops? What needs do we have that are not being met with or can't be met within that community? And what needs do we have that can be met within that community? So we're starting very much at the ground level here to simply establish the network. And from there, we'll be in a much better position to discover what needs there are, what needs can be met within our network, and what needs need to be met some other way. And I'm inviting other members of our group to chime in with anything I might have forgotten or gotten wrong. And let me know if that's not a helpful answer. Abby, feel free to ask a follow-up question. Check.
I could jump in and say a few things. One of the things, so I've been participating in this. My name's David Rossing. I'm at Union Cab Madison, and have been with this group over the last year. And it's been in parallel to other work I've been doing with a group called the Drivers Cooperative that comes out of New York City. And so they are kind of going head to head with Uber and Lyft using an app, but trying to make it into a worker co-op kind of situation where each driver is a full-fledged owner and has a voice and so on. And it's an interesting model for a lot of different reasons that I'm not going to go into right now, but they have, they've reached out to Union Cab to get peer-to-peer support in terms of becoming a worker cooperative that really has been able to have a kind of fidelity to core values all of these decades that have really allowed us to thrive as a worker democracy. Their ambition is to create little in cities all over the country, other worker co-op type taxi / TNC type operations. And in fact, one example of the work that's already been accomplished through this co-op connection network is connecting with Jim, who's connected to another taxi organization. And so we've already been making some progress in this regard. But it's, from my side, what we're doing here as something that runs parallel with this other effort is really fundamental in that all of these different new worker co-ops will face different kinds of barriers to entry legally in their municipality or in their state in terms of insurance issues. And there are, there's just like a litany of other things with regard to how dispatching happens and so on, that peer-to-peer sharing is really going to be fundamental for problem solving all these new enterprises. So I see this as like, I love the way that Chris and Jim have sort of painted this broad picture, but it's really quite exciting and in real problem solving that will go forward, like, I think in a real rapid way over the next year or so with this other drivers cooperative thing. So it's really great.
Are there any other clarifying questions that anybody has? Because we're not capturing this rich conversation that David and Jim have contributed to. And so we need to shift modes to get into that. But if you have any other clarification questions about our presentation, please ask. Hearing none, let me just, I'm gonna rejig things here a bit. I need to move screens so that I can just a second here. All right. So we want to have a conversation. The rest of this session is going to be dedicated to you. We, for a while now, have realized that, the 5 to 7 of us that get together do not represent the entirety of worker co-ops, even in any manner at all. And we really want to open this up and get your input about what we're doing here and how we could improve that. So we have some questions. The main question that we want to answer is, what would facilitate our growth as Co-op Connection Network into a mature regional effort for worker-owned cooperatives to connect with and support each other? In asking these questions, the rational objective is to explore how to grow Co-op Connection Network into a valuable regional resource. And what we'd like you to experience is that the people in this workshop would feel empowered to join us in making this a reality. Unabashedly a sales pitch. So let's get started here. I'm going to go through a series of questions here. We've got folks that are going to be helping us scribe your answers. And we had to switch from the presentation view because we realized that when we thought we could have somebody in the background here typing these in, but they don't appear on the presentation slide until you go off that slide and come back to it. So we just decided to switch back to this mode. But the first question is, what did you learn from our presentation? And remember that you might be muted, and please speak slowly for the interpreters. What did you learn from our presentation? And I'd really like to go around the room here. So if we can call on people. David, maybe you could, I know you're part of us, but maybe you weren't involved in the presentation, so maybe you could start us off. You are, yeah, thanks.
It's hard to answer that question. I in a general sense, this is kind of, I learned how to give a really clear, wonderful presentation. I really appreciated the way that this was put together. Big kudos, Chris and Steve. And I learned what a parking lot is now. I've heard that referred to over the last year. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll revisit. I will chime back in when I have something.
Okay. That's fine. It doesn't have to be a long thing. Abby, would you talk about anything that you learned from the presentation. You can also feel free to not.
Sure, I'll add a little.
Abby, would you be able to turn your volume up
Yeah,
on your mic?
I am not totally sure how. I know I've been having some trouble in past meetings this week being heard.
Maybe you could use your outside voice then.
All right, I will try to project straight into the microphone. Yeah, I think I'm learning how like having, I liked hearing both from David and Jim kind of how having this connective network is important both for the broadest, just like having those relationships in place and sort of for that philosophical solidarity, and also for these very nitty-gritty logistical problem solving pieces that each co-op, depending on their niche area, will need to work through. So I think it's helpful to kind of have that view of both the specificity and the broadness in having a network. I hope you could hear that.
Thank you. Jim. Jim, you're muted if you want to speak up.
Thanks. Yeah, definitely struggling to unmute myself. This is sort of an affirmation or a reminder in a way of as well as what I learned. You know, having been to many worker co-op conferences, I find that the favorite part that I had was when we would go out to the restaurant or the bar afterwards, and it would just be worker owners hanging out, talking, right? And we would inevitably start talking about our co-ops and the challenges we face, but also very much because we're all worker owners, also always through the lens of justice and sustainability and workplace democracy. We would be talking about, you know, business challenges. And there was something so special about that and so helpful about that that I couldn't get anywhere else. And again, this exchange David and I had about taxi co-ops and what we're going through, it ended up, we didn't plan it at all. It ended up going on for a long time. And it reminded me of the many experiences I've been lucky to have of really just hanging out with worker owners from other worker co-ops and just comparing notes and sharing tips and just, you know, supporting each other, both logistically and emotionally. And you know, so that's what I was reminded of in our presentation. And Chris's recap of the year was very helpful and validating. But in particular, just, you know, building direct community between worker owners and worker co-ops. And, you know, and we get very specific about different kinds of support, but it can go in all kinds of unexpected directions too. That's very helpful. But again, always through this lens of justice and sustainability. So that's what I'm getting from it. I hope that's helpful. Check.
Thank you. The question is, what did you learn from our presentation? Mike, would you be willing to share anything you learned?
Yeah, I've added a note to the chat as well, but you know, I just learned about some of the ongoing work with this particular cooperative ecosystem developmental effort. And, you know, I very much value the sort of space between, to quote Laura Oppenheimer. And certainly, you know, I'm always trying to inject both offers and needs market and time banking principles into the cooperative ecosystem, because I think this sort of peer-to-peer connection space is something that allows us to figure out how to meet each other's needs individually. And by meeting each other's needs individually, we simultaneously meet organizational gaps and intersections. Check.
Great, thank you. Steve Herrick.
I learned, excuse me. I learned that you all are operating on full consensus. And that's pretty impressive because most of the groups I know have to go on modified consensus. Full consensus is hard to reach. So well done.
Thank you. Josh. You're muted if you want to speak. Thank you.
I'm going to pass as I'm taking notes here.
All right, thank you. Thank you for taking notes, Josh. Appreciate it. Hillary Johnson.
Hi, I also put a note in the chat. Just it seems like maybe a perennial lesson that organizing takes time. And it's cool to see what you all have been working on. And yeah, I'm looking forward to see how it develops.
Thank you. David, do you have any comments?
Is there another David here?
David Shotke
Oh, okay, sorry.
is, I'm sorry, I don't see you on.
Hello, yes, sorry. This is David. We're actually, we met with Rec earlier last week, and we're actually students kind of researching solidarity economy and worker co-ops in Madison and around the country. So we're just kind of absorbing this information, but yeah, it's really interesting to see the work that you all are doing, challenges and overcoming those challenges you're facing.
Thank
So
you.
it's all kind of
And Renata?
Hello. I learned so many things. I think becoming aware of this network by itself was really interesting. And about the work and the different needs that it's covering that lies outside the scope of other worker co-op networks. So yeah, that was great. Thank you for sharing.
Great. There's somebody else. I'm not sure that I have everybody on here. Is there another David that wanted to pitch in?
There's a Rec who would pitch in.
Oh, sorry, Rep.
Oh, no, that's
didn't
fine.
call on you because you were listed as tech support. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think one thing that as you were presenting that I was thinking about is how important this kind of network is, especially right now when we aren't in person at conferences and where we need a little bit more formality in order to connect with each other. So like getting at what Jim was talking about, that like we need to be a little bit more intentional about creating those connections between worker owners. And just for context, for folks who weren't here last year, the theme of last year's Rendezvous was the role of worker owners in co-op development. So I think that's also a piece of what led to this network and how people envisioned it working. Pass.
Great. Does anybody else have anything to say in answer to this question? What did you learn from our presentation? Okay, well, let's move on to the next question. If I can get there. The question number 2, you know what, I'm going to move on. We have a ton of questions here and purposely created more questions. So I'm going to skip questions from time to time. What other efforts to organize and support worker co-ops are you aware of? And anybody can just pop up on this.
I'll jump in on this one because I actually know of a couple. There's obviously the municipal programs, but I think that might be a different topic. I think sticking closer to the subject that you're talking about, there are a couple of sector-specific networks around the country. So there's the Tech Co-op network. There's a new interpreter co-op network that the USFWC got started, and I think it's kind of slow to take off. And then I have a sense that there's like 1 or 2 others as well. So I think it might make sense for you to reach out to those more, specific, more narrowly defined networks and see if you could get some representation from those to join your network, which is a little more broadly defined, as a form of kind of semi-formal federalism or federation, because you could piggyback on the experiences that they've already had, both good and bad. And I think you'd have a lot of connections that you might not come up with otherwise. So
Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Anybody else? What other efforts to organize and support worker co-ops are you aware of?
This is Jim. It's something I mentioned in our group, but not so publicly. Through a sociocracy development organization, a method of governance, I've connected with a bunch of co-op people from different countries. And there is a strong peer-to-peer network apparently in England, practicing something that they call barefoot co-op development. Very much of a worker co-ops teaming up with each other to support each other and to help new worker co-ops. And so I've taken a lot of inspiration from that. And through that, I've also connected with someone from Turkey. And apparently there are quite a few co-ops in Turkey, something I had not been aware of at all. And they are through exploring sociocracy, they're also developing a lot of connections with each other. And I keep hearing rumors of different peer-to-peer networks in other nations, such as Japan. And I'm very interested in exploring those and trying to strengthen those connections and seeing what we can learn. And for me, that's very exciting because of the cross-cultural nature of that, the ability to learn and get different perspectives, because those networks are cross-cultural. And it's one reason I'm personally trying to take a very global approach to this concept of peer-to-peer, trying to develop a fusion of local/regional and global. So there's a couple thoughts. Thank you.
Anybody else aware of any other organizations or efforts?
In Madison, we've had a lot of peer support informally in Madison over the years, and we're trying to formalize that a little bit more locally. And I know it sounds like the Bay Area is also trying to do that, so sort of to create more local connections between co-ops that are sort of in the same physical location. And then I think the other thing is that the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops has their co-op clinic that I think is intended to support co-ops. And it is based on people who have worker owner experience, but it seems a little more formal in the sense that like you have to contact them and like sort of receive services rather than being able to just reach out to another co-op and ask them about their experience.
Yeah, and let me add the the US FWC also has the tech peer worker co-ops. I'm not sure what the formal name, I've been working with them, but I don't remember what the formal name is that. And the ICA International Cooperative Alliance also has a peer tech co-ops, not specifically worker co-ops, but they tend to be worker co-ops. Anybody else?
Yeah, so I mean, one that I just dropped in the chat, just kind of because it came to my mind as Jim was speaking, was and maybe this is the one that Jim was referencing, but the Sociocracy for All Co-op Circle, which meets every 4 weeks for cooperatives that either are already using sociocracy or maybe are interested in exploring sociocracy in their cooperatives. It's, that is a peer network that, where they can, explore challenges and really determine sort of what their interests, their needs are. But I'm sure that they're coming together around a really specific topic, but the relationships they develop in that room can transcend that particular topic and develop into relationships that they use to explore other discussions that they might want to be involved in. And that's an international effort. Check.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? Well, let's move on to Sorry, I have to remember to click back here. Let's move on to some reflection. What excites you about what we're doing? Again, just pop up with your answer. And that's a non-starter. Nobody's excited about what we're doing. What stood out as unique in our report?
I can jump in with what excites you about what we're doing.
Okay.
Is that I think that what this group is doing is making it easier for worker co-ops and worker owners to connect with each other. And I think that's really critical. I think it can be like, just having done like a lot of outreach for this event, it can be really difficult to reach worker co-ops, especially smaller ones, or especially where like there might not be contact info listed, or really large ones where there's like a general email address, but it doesn't necessarily get to somebody who is going to be the one who can help with what you need. So I think that's really exciting, to be making it easier for co-ops to reach each other. You know, that obviously, like, as businesses, the focus of a co-op needs to be making sure it's easy for clients, customers, consumers to reach them, but to make it easier for us as worker co-ops to reach each other, I think is exciting. Pass.
Cool. Anybody else? What excites you about what we're doing with Co-op Connection Network?
I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but I think it's exciting to see the development of an infrastructure for our movement. I mean, it's been going on for a while, but the more efforts like this, the better from my side.
I will say that I'm excited about this effort and have dedicated some time to it, because I'm really all about Principle 6, cooperation amongst cooperatives. I think that's really the key. It might be the key to making cooperatives successful overall, is if we learn how to cooperate with each other, support each other, and I see this as doing that.
So I'll drop in with maybe one more piece of feedback. I was holding space for others, but I'm in a facilitation apprenticeship called Headwaters with Aorta Anti-Oppression Resource and Training Alliance. And one of the exercises we did in a recent practice lab is likely familiar with some folks here who do facilitation, or maybe even some folks who've just experienced this technique, but liberating structures, wise crowds, or as they called it in that particular lab, the Council of Wise Ones, a 13-minute exercise where you effectively do a peer support clinic that you can kind of do in a round, or you can, if you have limited time, you can just kind of, have people invite themselves into a space. But what excites me about this effort and about the possibilities of like using this technique in that space is like inviting and creating a container for these very autonomous and spontaneous clinics to pop up where peer support can occur. And what we experienced in doing that exercise as a part of this apprenticeship was that some of us come to this apprenticeship thinking that we are coming to learn particular techniques. And what blooms inside of this apprenticeship is that there's specific skills and capacities and gifts that are unique to us about our facilitation style. And similarly, in cooperatives, there are unique ways that people approach and come to cooperation. And that in these Wise Crowds exercises or Council of Wise Ones exercises, you can surface the unique ways that people are doing cooperation inside of their cooperatives, or even just in their life even. So I would invite like people to review that sort of liberating structure and, maybe consider, bringing it into your own practice in your cooperative or bringing it into this effort. Check.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? Well, we're moving along here. I'm going to skip the rest of the reflective questions and get into how do we view this? You know, what is going on here? How could we enhance our impact? The Co-op Connection Network, how could we enhance our impact? Do you see things that we're not doing that we could be doing? Are you aware of any other ways that we could interact with folks that we're not using? Okay, I don't sense any excitement on that one. What elements are we missing or need to focus on more?
Well, I can chip in a bit on design perspectives, because of course, like it's a field that I really enjoy and like, the graphic design world, but I find that it holds the magic that keeps capitalism irresistible and together, and it keeps people coming back for more. So I see using like really smart, consistent branding. It's very powerful in transmitting the message clearly, getting the folks that need to be in the room informed, and building the trust also in that. Sorry, I'm not feeling so well today, so my ideas are a little scattered, but that's just what's coming to mind, and tapping into the power of really good design in order to make the groups that you need and the outreach and the impact you want to have really clear. Yeah, check.
Thank you, Renata. And I hope you feel better.
This is Jim. I have something that I think that Renata inspired me to say. Yeah, the importance of good design, and it touches on one thought I had on my mind. There have been local, regional, peer-to-peer networks that have risen and fallen over the decades. And scale, I think, is one of the things we will encounter that we need to anticipate. If we are successful, I think, our top priority right now is just to try to build the number of contacts in the network, to like get points of contact, to have worker co-ops jump up and say, yes, this person will act as our point of contact in the network, so that we have that directory. But if we're successful in that, we'll probably run up against a scale issue of like, all right, how can, which we see in social media and we see in other aspects of networking, how does it become manageable and useful for people? How do we keep it from being overwhelming while still being useful? And so there's a way, I think, that we need to be creative and imaginative about how to structure communication so that the communication is not impeded, the communication is encouraged and easy, but also so that people can find what they're looking for. People can, people who have needs can meet people who have offers, and vice versa. And so how do we facilitate selectiveness without filtering people out? And ideally, this will grow to like hundreds of contacts. How do we scale it so that it stays useful without being overwhelming and stays transparent, even if it gets big? So that's a question I'm tussling with, but I'm excited about that prospect. And also I think that if we can solve that problem, it would help make the difference between this network and others in the past that have dispersed. Check.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else?
Yeah, something I was thinking about, inspired by what David was talking about, is that maybe in addition to reaching out with sort of the big picture ask of we're trying to build this big network, including some stories of how this kind of networking can be useful to individual co-ops might be helpful in getting people to want to participate. Because I think it's easy to be like, oh, either to say like, oh, we've seen this happen and it didn't work, or to say, oh, there's nothing my co-op can offer, or there's nothing my co-op needs. But seeing examples of how co-ops have used these kinds of connections, I think can help inspire people to see a need and a desire and an interest in joining and participating.
Thank you, Rick. Anybody else? Let's move on to the next question then. Why is it so hard to practice Principle 6, cooperation amongst cooperatives? Oops, why is this not working?
So go ahead.
All right, I'll go and I'll try to be fairly brief. I think this is a really crucial question. I think we need to ask ourselves this on a regular basis. To start with, the thing that comes to my mind is something that I've been thinking about and to a certain extent talking about for quite a while now, which is that we don't do what they do in Mondragon and also in Emilia-Romagna, which is they actually have co-ops that are each other's supply chain. And so it's a very immediate, obvious, concrete way for co-ops to work together because they actually buy each other's goods, right up the supply chain until you have the finished product. And in some cases, co-ops will actually spin off a new co-op to make a specific part. If the co-op gets too big or too cumbersome in whatever way, they'll actually spin off a new co-op. And that's part of the reason why Emilia-Romagna has so many co-ops. So I'm sure there are other answers to this question, but that's the one that really comes to mind for me, because here in Madison, I've been talking about this for quite a long time. We have the largest number of worker co-ops per capita of any city in the entire US. And yet nobody is in each other's supply chains, except for like once in a great while. And this would be one of those times, because my co-op is actually providing interpretation for this event. But in the big picture, you don't see that. You don't see people, buying from each other at a wholesale level on a regular basis. And so I think that it's important for us to, we don't want to get too specific in what our co-op development looks like, but I do think that we should prioritize new co-ops that can provide goods and services to existing co-ops or that can otherwise connect existing co-ops. I think it has to be something that's very much in the front of our minds as we think about co-op development generally. Thanks.
Thank you, Renata.
Yeah, that was a really awesome answer, Steve. So something, I think it's many things, but something that I've been exploring with Michael Linton's work on local exchange trading systems is that just the fact that we're still using, that we're so enmeshed in a monetary system that is very dog-eat-dog and still have to survive, like with this, with debt, with loans, and a lot of the infrastructure makes it really hard to cooperate. So what his work is dedicated on the solution is on getting more parallel currencies going and more, not necessarily barter exchange, but like more formalized ways of not having to depend so much on cash. So seeing seeing cash as a big killer to this cooperation, and seeing alternative ways of trade, which could be linked back to time banks or other methods of agreements for making more significant economic impact that does not carry debt. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank
Check.
you. Anybody else? Well, thank you. Those were very thoughtful answers. I want to skip down to the last question here because we only have 4 minutes left. How will we implement the changes that have been suggested?
I'm just going to glance here because I have been speaking on multiple questions and just summarize the comment that I threw in the chat, but network maintainers and network maintenance, you know, how do you resource network maintainers to
Excuse me,
build?
Mike,
Oh.
is this a response to the last question?
It is a response to the last question.
Okay,
Yeah.
Chris, if you wouldn't mind putting that response in that question. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, it seems that the two questions were connected. So the first question
Okay.
answered and then this second one. So yeah, put it wherever you need to. But network maintainers and network maintenance, resource your network maintainers and figure out how to hold those network maintainers with care so that you do not overburden someone who is already overburdened with work within their cooperative. And that may be a possible implementation check.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? How will we implement the changes that have been suggested?
This is Hillary. One thing I'm thinking about in this conversation is how it can be challenging even within co-ops for worker owners to feel engaged and maintain an ownership mentality. So maybe my thought is sort of sideways to the question, but I think related to what Mike just said, education within co-ops, ongoing education is really important for keeping worker owners sort of aware of rights and responsibilities and their power as owners. And that might help with sort of a movement mentality to encourage people to make connections and maintain networks.
Thank you, Hillary. Any other ideas?
Renata wrote in the chat, developing visual materials that inform co-op members clearly why joining can help them and how to participate with consistent branding.
Thank you. I'll paste that in.
It's in there already.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Well, I think that brings us to the bottom of the hour. We have gone through a bunch of stuff and really appreciate everybody's input. Gotten great input from you all. And thank you all for joining our session. Chris, any closing words?
Just gratitude for everybody's participation. We have a lot of ideas to work with for continuing this work.
All right. Well, we'll keep the room open until the next session starts, I think. So if anybody wants to hang out, please feel free to do so.
Yep. Thank you, Steve and Chris. The next session starts after lunch, so we'll start up at 1:30. But we'll have the Zoom open during lunch.
Great.
Great session, y'all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Now you've got me concerned about my presentation tomorrow, and we don't have nice fancy slides like this. Like, geez. I have to up our game.
Yeah, so